My name is Magali Eben. I am Senior Lecturer in Competition Law here at the University of Glasgow, where I also convene the International Competition Law and Policy LLM program. And I love teaching competition law because competition law is a field of law which is inspired and applied through other sources of knowledge. So that includes primarily, but not only, economics. And so that makes it a really interesting dynamic. So you're learning about the law with some economics sprinkled in. That also comes with some challenges. So competition law is a system of rules that has existed for a long, long time. However, things have changed significantly. When these rules were adopted, we had really simple products and we paid for things in money, and we believed that bananas and pineapples and avocados were these really exotic products. Since then, things have evolved, so our products come from further afield, they are more complicated, and trade has gone global. So can competition law keep up in this environment? This is something that I would like us to talk about a little bit more. First things first, what is competition law? You might have heard of competition law before under a different name, because sometimes it is called antitrust law. But regardless of what you call it, you're likely having competition law in your country, or at least in one of your neighboring countries, because over 130 countries in the world have a system of competition law. In fact, competition law systems globally share significant similarities, even though the cultural or economic context might differ. So in a nutshell, what is competition law? Competition law are rules that kind of govern the conduct of powerful companies in the market to make sure that these companies don't abuse their power or don't conspire together to deprive society of the benefits that a market should bring. The fundamental principle here is that we believe we get the best societal outcomes if companies compete with each other rather than cooperate. This might come as a bit of a surprise that this is something we do in law, but if you think about it, competition is the fundamental principle of contemporary democracies. In Europe, in the West, and in other countries, we think rivalry is what drives us forward. Think of how we choose our political leaders. In democracies, we think we use elections because that leads us to the best leaders. We apply the same principle for picking the best athletes in a country or the best singers. You might have something like X Factor in your country. That's a competition. We all love it, right? Competition, fundamentally, the intellectual basis for our societies and also for the way we organize our economy. And this is the context in which competition law comes in. We think that competition will lead sellers to provide the best products, best quality at the most affordable prices, and make sure that everyone's needs will be satisfied. Of course, you can have a debate about whether this is actually true. And these are the debates we have in class, so you could join us here for that. But that is the fundamental principle on which competition law is based. Modern competition law consists of three big categories of rules. There are rules that stop powerful single companies from abusing their power. There are rules that stop companies from agreeing with each other not to compete. And then there are rules that, under certain circumstances, stop one big company from buying another, if we believe that acquisition would deprive society of the benefits of competition. If you have these three categories of rules, you have a modern competition law system. Now, these kind of modern competition law systems weren't adopted that very long ago. The earliest were adopted in the 19th century, and many were actually adopted in the 1950s and later. But although this is relatively recently, the economic theories and principles upon which these laws were based are much, much older. The concepts we use in competition law now, they go back to the time when a marketplace looked a little bit like this. From early medieval times in Europe, sellers have congregated physically in one space. So you would go to a local market to buy the products you needed. This, of course, evolved. Throughout the 17th and the 18th century, you would have the sellers of a similar product all set up shop in the same street. You would have a street where all the brewers were, where you would go to buy your beer. Or you would buy your bread on Bread Street. Or if you needed material to make clothes, you would go to Haberdasher Street. If you're ever in the UK, you will see that street names are still named after the sellers on those streets in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century. Now, this is the context in which our economic theories were developed. You would have these big thinkers, these big philosophers that would walk down the street and see how shopkeepers, how sellers would operate. And they would realize that all the flower shops were in the same street. Now, eventually, as they describe things and they put pen on paper, they start kind of coming up with our concept of a market as this physical location where a group of shops would congregate to sell a particular product. This led to the economic theories, written by our very own Adam Smith here in Glasgow, that we still use to this day, and we use them in competition law cases. To this day, every single competition law case has certain elements in common, including the fact that we try to identify a market in most competition cases. Now, how do we do that? Well, we say, okay, what is the product that is being sold? What are the geographic boundaries of this market? And what price is this product being sold at? We do this so we can kind of delineate a market, identify the companies that operate there, and who they compete with. This idea is relatively straightforward. You need a product, you need a price, you need a location, and then you can identify the market and the competitors. So it is relatively straightforward. Let's think about a flower shop. In the 19th century, if you went onto a street full of flower shops, you could walk into any of these shops to buy your flowers. So let's zoom in and imagine that we've got a really nice lady called Anna, and she sells flowers in a shop. You've seen that on the street there are 4 or 5 flower shops, but you think this shop looks particularly nice. You walk in and Anna says to you, okay, I sell flowers, they are all locally grown. Anna sells bundles of flowers. If I were to ask you, what is the product that Anna sells? It is straightforward. She sells flowers in bundles. And you could say to her, I would like a bundle of tulips and daisies, please. And she would say, okay, that's £10. Now, what is the price you are paying her? Well, you're paying her a certain amount of that country's currency. So product price, very straightforward. What geographic boundary does her market have? Well, you leave the shop, you look around, all the flower shops are on the same street. Next to Anna's shop, Frida sells flowers. And on the other side, Sergio sells flowers. If Frida or Sergio were to bring in new types of flowers or increase or decrease their prices, Anna would have to carefully think about whether she needs to change the own prices she charges or her own flowers she sells. That indicates that she competes with those flower shops on her street. Every decision she makes, she has to consider what her neighbors will do. Straightforward. If there was a competition case here, you would know the competitors are Sergio, Frida, Anna, all the flower shops on the street. Here is your market. Of course, things are no longer that simple. Over time, things have actually become quite complicated. Just looking at flowers, our products have become nicer, there's a bigger variety of flowers, but they also come from further afield. We get our roses from Kenya. Similarly, if you eat an avocado, it wasn't grown in the UK. You might look on the label and see it comes from Mexico or Guatemala. So not only is our geographic boundary expanding, our products have become so complicated too. The smartphone that you currently have in your pocket, far more complicated than a daisy that Anna sells in her shop. So where does that leave us? Well, for competition cases where we need to identify markets, we've been doing the same thing for years. We use the same principles, we apply the same methods. But recently we have actually faced quite a challenge because we started dealing with big tech. Who we consider to be a big tech company changes depending on where in the world you are. But in the West, this is Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft. And in Asian countries, you have Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. What these companies have in common is that they make our understanding of a market incredibly complicated. Indeed, at first, when we started dealing with these companies in competition law cases, there was this tendency to say, we can't deal with them, there is no market, we're not going to bring any cases. Of course, we have evolved, we have started adapting, but I want you to think about this challenge. Let's use an example to think about what the market is in the case of a big tech company. Let's start with Facebook, or better known as Meta. Meta is a company that offers a variety of services. It has Facebook social network, Instagram social network, there is a marketplace where you can buy products from other people, it has an advertising service, it has virtual reality headsets, and so on. Can you tell me what the product is that Facebook sells to you? And talking about selling to you, what price do you pay to Facebook? Do you offer the £10 that you would offer Anna for her flowers? Do you actually give up any kind of currency? In fact, in America, some cases were dismissed against some big tech companies because they said, you're not paying anything, therefore there is no market and there is no economic activity at all. We have now moved away from that, but still, can you tell me what the price is that you pay to use Instagram? And then lastly, the geographic boundaries. What is the boundary of a big tech market? Is it the UK? Is it Europe? Is it the world? Well, no matter how big it is, I think we can all agree it's far bigger than one street in one little town, as we had with Anna's flower shop. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is to these questions. Instead, I'm going to ask you to come to class with me and let's talk about it. These questions are only partially solved. So if you study here with us, then maybe you can solve them and push the boat forward. Thanks.